All right, let's begin. My name is Alex, and I work for Nuvius. We've been doing SharePoint and Office 365 development for many years. A little bit of why I'm here. I'm here to talk to you about NativeScript. Surprise, surprise, right? But that's not all. I want to talk to you about Office 365 also, and how NativeScript can play well with Office 365. A little bit of history first. Microsoft's Office product has had huge success. The last couple of decades, they've been installed in businesses worldwide. Tons of people use it, as you know. 750 million people were using Office at the peak in 2010. Now, the SaaS version of the product, Office 365, is also becoming pretty big. It's just passed Salesforce to be the -- app package used in the enterprise. 50 million active users per month use Office 365. These are huge numbers. You can't ignore this. So let's say 20 people per company average. It's about 16,000 companies that for every one of you here in this conference. That's a lot. Now, if you've been tasked in the past with integrating Office products with a mobile system before, this is a very common task. Developers want to build mobile solutions on top of SharePoint and Office 365 backend. This is commonly done. You've been faced with a couple of problems as a developer trying to do this. One problem is that you're dealing with proprietary software. Okay, so there is one example. And in the past, this has been very difficult. We've had to do crazy things like installing Excel on servers and writing COM code to do that, to talk to them. The second problem we're dealing with is mobile solutions for multiple platforms. Devices are constantly increasing. We have Android apps, we have iOS, we have Windows. So that's another problem that developers had to solve. And, having this communication is a little bit difficult, especially in the past. So now we come to a new age where we have NativeScript. It solves one of our problems for mobile solutions. Now you can write mobile apps for multiple platforms at the same time. So that eases a little bit of the pain. And Microsoft has also been helpful in opening up their Office 365 product. So they have the Graph API, they have other APIs that are more open. So they're working pretty hard on that as well. So I'm here to talk to you about today this in-between layer. How do we get our NativeScript apps to talk to Office 365? So I'm going to show you a little demonstration of a new SDK that I've been working on, and it's in the form of a plugin called NativeScript MS Graph. So this plugin is what I'm going to show you, and it's available on NPM right now. So let me jump right into that demo. I'm going to be writing some code, and hopefully our internet connection is going to be working fine, because I rely quite a bit on it. Okay, I have a little application here. I'm going to launch the iOS app. Thank you very much. This goes away with a new version that TJ told us about this morning. Okay, our app is launching. Now I'm going to show you the code a little bit here. So you've already seen some examples of code in this conference, some very good tutorials, and hopefully you had a chance to attend the session yesterday. So here is the app. I'm going to click on View Files, and what you see here is the Explorer view. Explorer view is just a page, and this is an XML page, and it's going to be talking to a OneDrive service here that we have in the Services folder. And right now, we're seeing this files and folders showing up, kind of like an Explorer, a Windows Explorer, or whatever you have there. So right now, we're returning fake data that's stored in a static array that's loaded into memory. So we have our folders, our files, everything is basically mocked. And we can sort of drill into things and look at them, and we can even create new folders, like so. And we can select things, we can delete things. You get the idea. So everything is working on an in-memory tree here. Well, this is great, but it's not very useful for us, right? We want to be able to connect our OneDrive, which I was talking to you about earlier. This is part of the Office 365 suite of services. So I have a bunch of files and folders here in my OneDrive. This is just a test account I've set up. So how do I show these files and folders in my NativeScript app? This brings me to the NativeScript MS Graph plugin that I was talking to you about earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and install that plugin now. Come on. Yes, great. Okay, so every time you talk to a Microsoft service, you need to get an authentication token using OAuth. They have an OAuth service. You create an account, and with every single request, whether you're going to Office or OneDrive, you need to pass in a token. So we're pulling in, as a dependency to the MS Graph SDK, we're pulling in the NativeScript OAuth plugin as well, which you can use separately, but you don't have to if you're using the MS Graph SDK plugin. So now that we have that installed in our project, I'm going to go ahead and rerun our application and have that live synced in the background. Now, I can start calling into things, into the SDK, and the number one command or the number one import that we need to remember is SDK helper. Everything happens through SDK helper. So I'm going to import that. We're going to be using that quite a bit. And in the app.ts file, that's, if you all remember, that's where the application initially launches. We're going to need to initialize the SDK helper. So we're going to call initialize with two parameters. One is a client ID, and the other one is scope. So these two parameters are linked to your application that you've created using Microsoft's Azure Active Directory, or they have a shortcut that you can use. It's this URL up here, apps.dev.microsoft.com. So I'm using one of these as my client ID, and to add an app is really easy. You just click add app, and you set it up as a native app, and you get this client ID. And the second parameter here is scopes. Scopes is basically the permissions that your app will need to access different APIs. I need the files, right? So I'm reading OneDrive files, so I need that. So I've saved these already in my constants module, which I'm just going to reference here. So there's the client ID, and there's some scopes. So I'm going to go ahead and call my initialize function with my client ID and my scopes. This screen is very small. Okay, and instead of that, just the main page, I'm going to need a login page where I can enter my credentials. Login page is another just static string that's in my navigation module. It's just another constant. So the app relaunches in the background. I'm going to close that out. And now we have in our app a way to log into the Microsoft account. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. By the way, right now what it's doing is it's loading the Microsoft page, right? So this is not our UI. This is a UI that Microsoft provides, hopefully provides. Yes, that's correct. So this part is just a web view that's showing the UI for the login page. Let's see here. It's taking its time, huh? We kind of need this for the next step. Come on. Okay. Well, let's see. While that's thinking, I'm going to show you another thing here. So how do we use this NativeScript MS Graph as the actual functions that it provides besides authentication? We're going to need this SDK helper in a few places, so I'm just going to copy it. And if you remember the OneDrive service, this is the one that returns currently the mock data. Instead of the mock data, I'm going to need to call into the SDK. So instead of returning a promise with the fake data, I'm going to need to create a client, get a reference to the client rather. So I'm going to use the SDK helper, get authenticated client, and once I have the authenticated client, all the APIs are basically open to me. So this is a Fluent API, so we have all these different options available to us, all these properties. We want to talk to my personal stuff, so that's me, and then we want to talk to Drive, and then we want to get some items. Now, at the top level, we have an item ID that's root, but at every level, you have an item ID. Each item has an ID. So we pass that in here. Okay, and then what we want to do is create a request out of that, and we have an expansion string. This basically is building the query for you, so you don't have to worry about all the different syntaxes of the query. So we have an expand string, and we're going to do a get. And everything returns a promise. I'm not going to be handling any error conditions right now. So this returns a result of drive items for us, and we're going to just resolve that. Okay, so that's get drive items. Let's see if Microsoft will cooperate with us today. Yay! I'm going to use my test account here. And this is iOS. By the way, you see how my logo popped up there? I've stored that in Microsoft's Azure AD beforehand, so they know what my logo looks like. Okay, so I'm going to sign in. Now that I've signed in, the SDK keeps track of my access token. This is an access token that expires, but the NativeScript OAuth NativeScript OAuth plugin automatically refreshes it for you every time it expires. So sometimes it'll ask you to re-log in if the refresh token expired or if something else happened. So right now it's supposed to be getting some data for me. We also need the Wi-Fi for this part. Expand string. So when you're building an OData query, for example, you can use an expand string. In this case, it's expanding the children of the root item. So there's multiple ways. That's a very good question. There's multiple ways of accessing the children. I chose this way because I need to drill in recursively. but client.me.drive.items item also has children on it. So you can build a query that way as well. Okay? So we're not getting anything back at this time. Let's try this again. Now I'm going to restart this app. And if this doesn't work, we're going to be running out of time. So I'm going to just show you a video of how this works. Let's see. This is my OneDrive. I'm just going to refresh it and see if my files are coming back. Files are returning. So something is up here. Huh. Okay, let's see. Maybe I mistyped the query. Let's try this one more time. There we go. Okay, so I have these files and folders, as you can see. I'm going to try to go quickly now here. So as you can see, they're basically the same as we have here in OneDrive, right? So, for example, I have this this little picture here of a dog sleeping. I'm going to go ahead and upload that to my OneDrive. Upload it successfully. And if I refresh my app, there's my sleepy dog right there. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so you think that's cool? Let me show you something else. Now, let's say that you're traveling for business and your boss says, we want you to keep track of your expenses. And I want to see a real-time dashboard. How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? Okay, so he hands you this expenses file. It's an Excel file. He's got some cool dashboards here, and he wants you to keep track of the expenses in this Excel file. So it's just a regular Excel file. We're going to drop it into our OneDrive. Let's drop that in. I'm going to open that up. Now it's online. I'm going to edit the workbook. So it's exactly the same as you saw before. We have our dashboard, we have those charts, and this is Excel Online, so it's part of Office 365. So what if we want to also use Excel from our SDK? Well, we can do that. Let me go to the app, and as you can see, if I refresh it, I have my expenses file there. If I go in there, we're just going to have a bunch of rows because we didn't actually implement it yet. So I'm going to get that SDK helper again, and now I'm showing a different page. I'm showing the expenses page. So my expenses service is what returns that data for us. So right now, I want to get the transactions so I can display them here. How do I do that? Well, you've seen this before, right? We need to import our SDK helper. We need to get a reference to our client, get authenticated client, and the client has my stuff again. This is you've seen before, so I'm not going to go deeply into it, but there's one difference here. You see this little thing called workbook here? Now we're dealing with Excel APIs. So workbook, you can request the workbook, but we need to drill deeper in. We need tables. We need a specific table by the name of transactions table. And we need its rows. Let's request that and get all the rows. And now we have a result. So in Excel, we have our result, but we need to process it a little bit first. So the processed rows are going to be built into actually friendly rows, because the dates are not, they're just numbers instead of actual pretty dates. So I'm going to pass that mistyped result in there, and I'm going to resolve our processed rows to return it to the app. Okay? So that's getting transactions. Let's take a look at our Excel file, but the one in Office 365, and I'm going to tap on expenses, and voila. Look at that. We get all our expenses. So these things are categorized. We have the dates, we have the merchant, and we have the amount. We also have this little plus here so we can add a new one. Okay, so how do we add a new one? This is the one part that your boss is interested in the most, right? Because he wants to see how much of his money you're spending. So let's take a look at getting a new one in there. And that's just very simple API call again. So we're going to go to client. I'm going to copy and paste this. We get a client, we go to the drives, tables, table, transaction table, rows, request, and add. Okay, we add this new row. We don't need to process results. So this will just return you a new processed row already. This row will have ID on it. This is coming back from the API itself. So once I save that and I go back to my app, go to the expenses side, and I want to bring this up so you can watch it at the same time. Nope, not that. Autocomplete is great, isn't it? Let's do something Boston related. I spent $20 at the airport, so that's travel. I save that. And hopefully, again with the internet, I shouldn't keep blaming the internet. The first one was totally my fault. Come on. Logan. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, now watch this dashboard. So let's say this is the one that your boss is interested in the most because he can see all the little charts. So really expensive dinner. Whoa. And that was under, let's say entertainment, okay? And we did this in January 2015 because that's what I see here. What's visible on the screen. So, I'm going to save that. Watch the screen. Look at that. Popped right into place. Thank you very much. Thank you. So that's the Excel API. Now, of course, the Graph SDK or Graph API exposes a lot of other endpoints as well. Thank you for watching my demo. Just to finish off here, I wanted to say that the Excel and the OneDrive APIs are just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of other APIs available. There's users, groups, mail, calendar, contacts, notes, tasks, and probably in the future we're going to have Word, PowerPoint, so on and so forth. So I'd like you to possibly give me some ideas of where we should go next. Should we attack users? Should we attack calendar, mail? What are you interested in next? So feel free to get in touch with me right here. I am Digitalix on Twitter or on my blog at nuvius.com. Thank you very much.